Hope we will see all our speakers, key speakers, experts online. And now we are moving to our colleague from Tomsk State University. The theme of the next speech is social media and value dilemmas of digital culture, future trends for the new generation. And the author works here at Tomsk State University, as I said, and his name is Dmitry Galkin. He is an associate professor at Institute of Arts and Culture. And you can proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, and whatever time is in the city where people live who are watching our conference online. And I'm going to be talking about values and the culture. And the difference from what we heard is that many people were talking about brain and cognitive structures, individual processing of information. And the major idea I'm going to be talking about is that we are cultural animals. We depend on values and depend on the way how ideology shapes our values and behavior. So just for you to know, these are, next slide please. These are my research interests in digital culture and electronic arts have been my sort of major research interests since late 90s. And currently I've been working on artificial intelligence and artificial life theory and applications, also collaborative systems, specifically in creative communications online, and social robotics, just one of the recent things we started working on. And work at the Institute of Arts and Culture and Department of Humanities and Informatics here, Tomsk State University. And again, one of the major ideas I'm trying to argue for is that actually information era is coming to the end, and we are approaching the new, very interesting historical historical development, the culture of artificial life. And social media and digital technology has been getting more and more old-fashioned, I think. And on this slide, you see a sort of brief sketch of the transition from industrial culture to artificial life culture, 21st century. So key ideas for this talk is that social media must be considered and analyzed in the broader context of digital culture. And digital culture is based on totality of digital technology and reveals itself on several levels: material, symbolic, social, mental, and the level of values. It means that, and it's point number 3, that social media are strongly interconnected with other phenomena of digital culture. And point number 4, an influence and impact of social media is and will be defined by value dilemmas of digital culture, and ways to resolve these dilemmas is key to the future of social media. So we can't simply talk about social media without discussion of digital culture. So please, next slide. On this slide, you can probably see, or maybe, this is the picture, like elements of digital culture, and SM stands for social media. So CGI stands for computer-generated imagery, and everything else are key elements of the digital culture. You see internet, interactive architecture, artificial intelligence, electronic or cybernetic art, digital gadgets, video games, remediated things like we used to have photography, chemical photography. Now we have digital photography. We used to have radio translation. Now we have digital radio system. So all the media remediated in digital format. We also have software and what is popularly called now apps, applications, downloaded on most of the digital gadgets. So we also have robotics, and this is another part of the embodied part of the digital culture. And all these things exist together, so we can't separate, say, social media from remediation, because we have a lot of remediated elements of social media: photography, video, books, and so on. The same is with artificial intelligence. This is the sort of why we can talk about social media without connections to digital culture. When we talk about digital culture, what do we mean by culture, right? This is an interesting question. So as I said, digital culture is based on totality of digital technology and reveals itself on several values. So the upper level, well, it's not hierarchy, but it's just the how I put it on graphics. So the upper level is values. Then we have the level of mental, cognitive structures, stereotypes, the way culture makes us thinking and judging, also behaving. Then we have symbolic level, which is about language or languages. So the road sign system is language. Verbal language is another example. And systems of communication is a symbolic level. We also have institutional, social level, and it works with communities, groups, institutions. We are inside the institution currently with all the things I've mentioned inside the institution, I mean university. And number 5 is level of things, material objects. This is where we have real material gadgets, iPhones, iPads, personal computers, network servers, and everything else, which makes all these things possible. I mean, social media are impossible without material substance of the computer technology. So we have these 5 levels, and of course it is too complicated to cover every single level. I'd like to focus on values, but again, to understand social media, we need to put them in these contexts of culture instead of just and only context of cognitive processes. So the next picture you can see just an illustration how social media, again, stands for SM, are connected to different elements, different important things in digital culture with arrows, blue arrows. You can see these connections to robotics, to internet, to software, to artificial intelligence, to digital gadgets. So all these things go together. And let me just give a brief coverage of value dilemmas. I think there are 4 crucial dilemmas. And the first one is private property versus freedom of creation. And I'm sure all of you use something like torrent file exchange system. This is there because everything we share is copyrighted. But because of freedom of exchange and specifically the freedom to create something new, we oppose this idea of private property, which is like copyright system. Another dilemma is individualism versus cooperation in virtual community. Originally, computers and major elements of digital culture are designed in and for individualistic Western societies. It's supposed to be used by individuals for their private purposes. But what we have in social media, we have real and very collective cooperation of, and constant formation of virtual community, which is currently global. And there are a lot of comparisons what country it can be if you get together, say, all population of the Facebook. Another dilemma is transparency versus control. And this is about how, say, social networks, remember the story with one of the Russian social networks, how they can spy on you, how can they collect your data and use it for the purpose of control, instead of making government, making social life more transparent and easier to understood. We can have more what was called surveillance society, where all the data can be integrated by different sources of databases. Say, you just can imagine how much somebody can get to know about you if he or she takes data from your bank account, from your social security account, from your Facebook account, like all of your life in one data set in 5 minutes. This is about transparency, availability of data, but also about control. And the fourth dilemma is data trash versus knowledge management. And I think Professor Greenfield, she were talking about this meaningless but huge amount of information that is not utilized, which is just multiplied and multiplied and multiplied with no meaning attached, and with no even ability to be processed by somebody, because it's impossible for individual to get through all this information. So it's basically data trash, a trash can, instead of useful information. And what we need to learn and understand how to, as we follow Professor Zbankov idea, navigate, or what I call manage information and make knowledge out of it. So this is the brief cover, and let me explain why I think about dilemmas. Digital culture is based on two controversial ideological approaches. First is neoliberal consensus, and the second one is a mixture of militaristic, capitalist, and scientific discourse, which I can't even name. So, what is neoliberal consensus? So you see these white bubbles. White bubbles are about interested sort of institutions. And we have IT businesses, banks, entertainment industry, virtual community itself, governments and international organizations, who more or less agreed on these particular values: free access to information, Creative Commons, so kind of compromise to copyright system, User-centered market. So we operate on a free market, and it is user-centered or consumer-centered. And no governmental control on the internet. And this agreement supports what is going on in the field of high-tech and information technology. On the other side, and here you can see universities, there is a sort of underlying idea of control that unites cybernetics and information theory, which is the scientific sort of base of digital culture, militarism in DARPA style, and DARPA is the Advanced Research Project Agency, which actually invented, well, organized everything to internet can be possible, right? And then capitalism, which is really oriented to calculate everything, to effectively invest using these calculations. And as we know, capitalism is one of the major sources of computer revolution, because tabulating machines and first computers were heavily used by corporations. So on the one side, we have neoliberal consensus about freedom and technology. On the other side, we have underlying idea of control. So that's why I think dilemma is the right word to describe what's going on in digital culture. So let me explain in more details these dilemmas. And I think it's better to start with individualism versus cooperation in virtual community. Initially, as I said, and as we use it, every digital gadget is individual. Personal computer, notebook, smartphone, this is all even individualistic approach to computer technology. And it's important because before 80s, computers were shared stations for universities and corporations. There was no idea of personal computing. And now it's flourishing because it's individualistic. So I want my iPhone. I want my iPad. So this is how I enter the world of social media. But when I'm inside this world, I have another sort of obligation to share. I can't exist in any social network not sharing my photos, my comments, not sharing my liking, because otherwise it's useless. So I shouldn't behave as individualistic possessor of fashionable device. I should behave as a social somebody involved in virtual community. And specifically, we can see it when we use share button or like button. And on individualistic part of this experience, we have self-expression. I go to photo session, make a beautiful picture of me. Why? For myself? No. To show up on internet, on my Facebook account or Contact account. And so this is self-expression. I don't just share, I express myself. On the other side, we have group dynamics, which makes us responsible for collaboration, which makes us involved in projects. As I mentioned, this is a part of my current research interest, a possibility to electronically facilitate these kind of collaborations. So I don't just express myself. Suddenly I have invitation to this event, and I design my event. It makes me responsible for everything. And it's not self-expression. it's socializing myself through the virtual community. And another point I'd like to bring here is loneliness versus togetherness. So basically, one of the problems in individualistic society is megapolis loneliness. So you live in a big city and all the crowd around, but you feel alone. What virtual community gives you is the sense of togetherness. So to be with somebody, even you have 2,000 friends online, and of course it's fake friendship, but it makes a context to be together, to share, to like, so experience something with other people. And in this dilemma, I think the future solution will be following. Virtual community will become a new source of norms and social integration, equalizing takeovers of individualism and social atomization. It is really interesting because step by step, virtual community insists that this environment is norm setting. And norms appear from the community, and they oppose existing, say, political or economic or whatever norm setting exists. Next dilemma is private property versus freedom of creation. And in legal terms, this is a controversial situation between copyright and copyleft. What is called copyleft, all sorts of compromising or opposing activism against copyright system, which makes you owning some creative things you did. And it's fair enough. If I wrote and produced this song, why should I, and I want to sell it and make money, why should I let people just to share it for free? I don't want to. The same as in movie industry. Unfortunately, a virtual community doesn't respect it anymore. And we're going to have next generation really grew up with this idea that everything is shareable for free. And it's very, very hard to regulate. So we have this controversy between legal enforcement and community norm setting. And if you remember January 2012, when American government and also European government, EU government, introduced new legislation to regulate piracy online, there was a huge protest, starting with Google, a huge corporation, now one of the most expensive in the world, protesting against possible regulation of the this possibility of copyright. And the same happened with many other companies, because it's against the nature of the virtual community in social media. So another dimension of this dilemma is opposition between originals and digital replication. And it's important in the field of culture, because, say, museums believe that they have original things, objects. When they digitize them and they go online, these are replicas. But in digital culture, these replicas and possibility to share them are more important than original objects. And the same happening with documents. And the whole idea of originality dissolves. However, private property is about original things. So I own the painting of Matisse. I don't, but probably somebody does. And this is original Matisse. But in digital world, there is nothing original. Everything is replicable. How to regulate that? So what I think is going to happen Pirate nature of virtual community will lead to reconsideration of copyright system in favor of freedom and creation. It's inevitable, I think. And so copyleft will be stronger and stronger as we see, say, in European Union, how pirate parties become more and more popular among European voters. So it's the political power, real political power. Another dilemma is transparency versus total control. And first of all, remember Zuckerberg's famous statement, there is no private life anymore. So it's private life against public exposure. And the idea is, if you decide to become a part of a social network online, you give up your privacy. Because all your private life, where you are, you tag your geographical position. Where you've been, you put all your pictures online. So everything is shareable, must be shared, nothing to hide. And in Silicon Valley, I used to talk with engineers and people who work for social media companies like Facebook. For them, this is common sense. There is no private life anymore online. Just forget about it. And this is the very important achievements of Western civilization, the value of individual and his private life. Unfortunately or fortunately, historically, this value is about to change or disappear. Okay. And so we have electronic surveillance against watching the watcher. That's a popular topic to talk. When somebody, say, government can watch what I do, I can watch what they do using digital technology. And you can see this example of WikiLeaks story when they just simply cracked the email system or took some data legally and published, and made a public exposure of diplomatic messaging, and they said, that must be public, there is no privacy anymore. So, and I think conflict between transparency and control is unpredictable. It's going to be harder and harder. So let me skip data trash and knowledge management, and just to finish with this conclusion that in spite of the fact and some kind of critique about virtualization of individuals and their behavior and youth, I think what is going to happen is what I call saturation, or seeming virtual and real world, and all these things will be integrated in everyday life and experience naturally and effectively. And yes, there are some dangers, but we are not that dangerous as we can expect, I think. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for